18 years ago, Valentine's Day weekend 2000, I'm on patrol as a ski patroller up in the mountains at Snow Summit, where I've been for many years. I actually did 20 years up there as a ski patroller. And so one day, it's about 11 o'clock in the morning, snow is starting to come down, the storm is coming in, and I'm out on a hill check on my skis. And coming through an area where we had the snow guns on, closed to the public, a lot of noise and confusion and buried hoses and all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm coming through there, and right as I make my last turn out of that area, my skis hit the berm of snow coming out of our last snow gun. And they stopped dead. I kept going, busted out of my heel bindings, pile drived headfirst into the ground. Immediately, it was like an explosion went off in my body. I could feel myself tumbling through space, and I finally came to rest face down on the snow, looking back up the hill. And I quickly took stock of my situation and realized I couldn't move, I couldn't feel, and I couldn't breathe. And I knew that I was dying. And I look up the hill for something, anything, and there, of all people, is my father standing there. And he doesn't look like ghostly or ethereal at all. I mean, it's just my dad standing there, and he's wearing his old yellow windbreaker and brown pants like he's just out for a walk. And somehow the words came out, because I wasn't speaking or breathing. What do I do now? And I meant, what do I do now to come over to where you are and join you higher on the mountain, because I assume that's why you're here. And he says, just breathe. And these were like, this is the best advice I ever got from my dad. And I looked down, and my chest is starting to rise and fall on its own, and I can breathe again, and cold air is coming into my lungs, and vapors pumping out. And I look up to thank my dad for his great advice, and he's gone. Now I can't key my radio. I'm in full uniform. I can't key my radio because I can't move, but I hear the traffic start to happen for my rescue. And 6 guys show up on scene, 6 of my fellow patrollers. Chuck, Eddie, Alex, Rick, Josh, and Scott. Let their names be forever etched in the book, okay? And so they're getting me ready for the trip down the hill, packaging me, and it's a backboard, seat collar, and oxygen, the whole 9 yards. I mean, I'm what we call freight in emergency care. And we reached the point in the scenario where it's time to like log roll me over into the background, onto the backboard, and they do that. And just as they do, I'm not kidding, shaft of sunlight comes piercing through the clouds, diagonal shaft illuminates us there at the scene. And just right at that moment, the boys went off book. And by that I mean they did something that is not in our patrol manuals anywhere. They put their hands on me, and they prayed. And they prayed that I would be healed, that my healing would forever be a demonstration of God's love, compassion, and will for me in my life and in this world, and that I would forever be a witness to that. So as they were praying, all my fear left me. I had the feeling that something was happening here that was greater than I am, that I was only playing a part in it. And right there, I chose that whatever that part was, that I would play it no matter what. And so hands come off. They're going to fasten me to the backboard. They bring in my hand against my chest like this, and my other hand like this. I said, I feel that. I did the other hand, I feel that. Hey, boys, do me a favor, knock on my boots, will you? I knocked on my boots. I was able to correctly identify left and right. So like right from the beginning, something started to come through. Something started to come in. By the time I got to the hospital, I was in what I refer to as a state of grace. I knew something extraordinary was taking place. I didn't know what it was. Still couldn't really move or feel. I could breathe. But I was starting to get like gross movement back in my legs and starting to recognize like switches were getting turned back on again. And the doctor came in and he said 2 things to me about my condition. He says, 1, worst injury we've ever seen come off the mountain, which is quite a statement from the guy that runs the trauma center for the 2 major mountains in Southern California. We have 17,000 people on the hill on a given weekend. So worst injury we've ever seen. Coin flip, whether or not you'll ever be able to walk again. And I kind of looked at him and smiled and says, Doc, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Long story short, because there's more. I spent about a week at Loma Linda, critical care. And, I start to see like a parade of friends and fellow patrollers and people coming in to see me. And I'm telling my story of the miracle on the mountain, what happened up there. I can see how it reaches people, how it kind of transforms them, or at least puts them in touch with like their own ability to heal, their own ability to get better. And after about a week, the chief of neurosurgery and about 15 of his residents surround my bed, and they're recommending a 3-level spinal fusion and major surgery and all of that. And I go, boys, I know that you're making the right medical call. If our positions were reversed, I'd be making the same call for you. But I got to tell you, something really extraordinary is happening, and I just want to see how my recovery goes before I'd let you cut open my neck and staple my vertebrae together. And they, the doc was like all offended. Like I just, like dissed his expertise. And I could see like his little, his minions, his residents were they were like just amazed that anybody would just like blow off this guy. So. Anyway, about an hour later, I got my walking papers from the hospital. Apparently, if I wasn't going to consent to surgery, they needed the bed. So nurse comes in with a clipboard, says, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "How about there?" Turned out to be Daniel Freeman Memorial Hospital in LA, the second rated, I had no idea, spinal care unit in the country, second only to Johns Hopkins. Just another example of spirit going, yeah, let's go this way. So I met Daniel Freeman, and I'm still in this state of grace, and I'm praying and I'm meditating and I'm sharing my story around with other people in the stroke unit and the spinal care unit. A lot of those people were technically in worse shape than I was. And again, I could see just how like the story and that connection just had power, and it put people in touch with something within them. So I told my story a lot, as you can probably tell. So I'm out in the garden one day, and we had this amazing garden, huge banyan trees, like this acre of paradise in like the middle of Hard Streets, LA. I mean, and I'm sitting out there under the banyan trees with my friend Vicky. And I've known her for years, since we were kids, teenagers. And her husband, Michael, had died 5 years earlier from melanoma, a raging bitch of a disease. And during the last year together, their timeless love had just devolved into like, pain and recrimination and fighting and hostility and resentment and just horror in the last year as he came apart and they came apart. And finally, when Michael died, it was, tragedy, dear friend, young man, dying before his time, so to speak. But at the same time, it was kind of a great relief. And we're out there in the garden, and I'm talking with Vicky, and I'm telling her the story of what happened up on the hill. And I said, I know that there are angels in this world, and that some of them wear red jackets with white crosses on them. And I know that there are 6 angels now, meaning those 6 guys, that I can name, and just did. And then I had the feeling that someone else had joined the conversation. And I looked at Vicky and I said, Vicky, there's one more angel, and it's Michael, and he's here. And for the next half hour, I had the experience of channeling a conversation between Vicky and Michael on the other side. This never happened before. And what they said to each other is not for you, it was only for them, but they got to clear all that pain and struggle of the last year. They got to forgive themselves and forgive each other. They got to say, I love you one more time. And, excuse me. And so I come out of it, just like somebody turning on the light. And I'm sitting there across the little table from Vicky, and she's crying and I'm crying. And she says, do you know what just happened? I said, yeah, I do. I don't have a context for it. Nothing like this ever happened before, but yeah, I was there. And we didn't have a whole lot more to say. We hugged, she went on her way, and I went back up to my room, nightfall, just before bed. And Michael, that same presence, that same energy showed up in my room again. He said there was something he wanted me to tell his wife. And it was so specific, I thought maybe I was just nuts, which on any given day is a possibility. And so I held on to it all the next day until I was getting ready to go to bed the next night. And I picked up the phone, called Vicky. I said, Vic, Michael called me again, came to see me again last night, and he told me he wanted me to tell you something. She said, yeah, what is it? I said, he wanted me to tell you to reread the letter that he wrote you when the two of you first found out that he was terminal, the one you keep in the box under the bed. And she goes, oh my God, I can't believe it. I mean, I know the letter you mean. I do keep it in a box under the bed. And I hadn't been able to read that letter in years, but after I got home last night, after what happened in the garden, I took that letter out and read it again for the first time. And this was like the universe saying to me, all right, just in case you think any of this is a coincidence, pay attention. So I was out in the garden again the next day. And I held my hands up to the light. It's just like a scene from a movie. I held my hands up to the light and said, if it's possible for a group of guys to show up on a mountain somewhere and put their hands on me and transmit this kind of healing energy to me, why couldn't I do that for someone else? And the voice in the garden said, what makes you think you can't? And I went, oh. Spun around in my wheelchair, went back inside, went up the elevator, come out of the elevator. There's my friend Pat sitting there. She's on one of those rascal scooters, 300-pound black Baptist woman. Became my first friend when I got to the hospital, told her my story, wrapped her arms around me, just hugged me. It was just like getting held by the earth. And there's Pat when I come out of the elevator, and I said, come on, Pat, I need a witness. And we wheeled together into Macy's room. Now, Macy is an 85-year-old black woman. She's been at the hospital for months. She can't walk. She stays up all night. She can't eat. She can't sleep. She's not participating in physical therapy. I mean, basically, Macy's tenure at this hospital is done. They're just at the place where they're going to flush her out to a facility, God's waiting room, as we called it. And so Pat and I wheel in on to Macy's room, and she and I had become friends. Macy, she told me her whole story. I told her mine. And we came up on either side of her bed, and I said, Macy, I've been out in the garden again, and God told me that he was going to allow me to heal people by putting my hands on them. And she looks at me and she goes, oh, would you put your hands on me, please? And I said, well, that's kind of what we're here for. And she had a whole list of stuff she wanted me to pray for. I mean, she had it down. I mean, it's like she can't eat, she can't sleep, she can't walk, she can't move, she can't get out of bed. She got bed sores up and down her body. And, before I know it, we were like rolling up her nightgown, and I said, well, let's not roll it up too far. I don't want to put my hands on too much there, Macy. And she cracks up and Pat cracks up and we go to work. And for about a half an hour, I'm just doing what the boys did on the hill did for me. I can improvise a bit, so I, took it where I took it, and Pat, for her part, was praying as only a 300-pound black Baptist woman can pray, just filling the air with, glory and hallelujah, and just this incredible moving, rising energy just happening in the room between us. And this went on for about a half an hour, and finally, again, it was just like, somebody flipped on a switch, and I'm sitting in a room with two sweet old ladies, and I was like, girls, this has been amazing, but I'm exhausted and I gotta go to bed. So I went back into my room, crawled into my bed, fell asleep right away, woke up the next morning, physical therapy at 8:30, come out of physical therapy, there's Pat sitting in the hall on our little rascal scooter, and we kind of wheel up together and we're debriefing about last night, wow, amazing and all of that, and suddenly we hear, there he is. And we both turn, and here comes Pat walking down the hall with her physical therapist, not supporting her. She's walking on her own, walking down the hall towards us, and she's saying, there he is, the power of Christ done come through Doug, and I can walk again today. Now, that's as much of my story as I'm going to tell. But that moment was the true moment of awakening for me, and the true moment of, oh my God, I got to figure out what just happened. So it's been 18 years of that now, and here I am sharing it with you. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you.